Yes, Herman, that is the definition of bias. Prejudice in favor of one thing, for or against one thing. But what does it mean? Prejudice in favor. So prejudice is a great word we could use for bias. Unfair is also a great word we can use for bias. Wow, that is quite the definition. All dogs are good. Agreed. Well, why would this statement be bias? All dogs are mean. Because some of you are saying all dogs are nice, but is that true? Sarah, it's biased because that's an opinion and not a fact. They probably had a bad experience with the dog. Good. And they are traumatized. Good. And they think they're all mean. Good. Usually bias is formed based on our experience. So if someone has a good experience with dogs, they might say, no, dogs are awesome. But if someone has a bad experience with a dog, they might say, ugh, dogs are mean. So usually when you see this word all, that typically means that there is some bias. Because usually all is not encompassing. There's always exceptions. So this is an opinion. Now, why are we talking about bias? Bias is an unfair opinion that's slanted towards one side or the other. Now, I wanted to bring up this because it's so important that we understand bias as we're looking at documents and sources. Okay, because a lot of sources may have bias, and you need to be able to find that bias, recognize that bias, and look for sources that show both sides. When you're a historian, you always look at multiple sources. You never look at just one. If you only look at one, you're only getting one side of the story. And as a historian, you are trying to put together the puzzle pieces to create a whole picture. So that means you need lots of different sources. So, like we left off on yesterday, we left off talking about primary sources. Okay, so I'm going to ask that we quiet down on the chat for now. We'll get back to it in a little bit. And we are going to move forward. Here we go. Shazam. All right, this is where we left off yesterday, talking about primary sources. So, this was just a list of examples, interviews, autobiographies, which is what we're working on for our assignment, diary entries, photographs from the event, birth certificates, death certificates, meeting notes, personal artifacts, maps, the whole 9 yards. But I wanted to show you some examples of primary sources because I feel like pictures are just so good. They enhance our learning. Here are some examples of primary sources in real life. Let's take a look at these, study these sources. Okay, right now we've got on the left, this is the Declaration of Independence. Okay, this is a picture of the Declaration. Just as a reminder, if any of you forgot from your American history class last year, the Declaration of Independence was signed on July 4th, 1776, and it was a declaration given to the King of England saying that the United States no longer wanted to be a part of England. We are breaking up with you. It was a huge breakup letter, okay? We're like, we don't want to be with you anymore. You did this and this and this and this, and we broke up with England. And England cried about it, okay? Which led to a war. So, that's the Declaration of Independence, a great primary source. So when you're looking for things, if you were to do a study on American history, Declaration is an awesome place to go because it is from that time. Another primary source, this picture on the right, with these young gentleman with a machine gun, is from World War II. This was a real photograph from World War II. It gives us an idea of what life was like. We can see what their uniforms look like. We can see what kind of machinery they used. They were using machine guns during this time, which made this war pretty deadly. So looking at photographs like this really help historians understand what was happening. So, thank goodness for the invention of the camera. Yay! So, these are great examples of primary sources. Another example, this is a diary. This is the diary of Anne Frank. Anne Frank was a young girl from the Holocaust. She was Jewish. She was forced into hiding for years. Okay, can you imagine being stuck in your room or stuck in your attic for years and years and years? That would be terrible. Anne Frank, she did hide in an attic for a couple of years, and she kept a diary of her experience in the Holocaust. So, this diary is a wonderful primary source because she was an eyewitness. She lived through it. What a great source. We can read her diary. I actually have a copy of her diary in my classroom where you can read it, read about her experiences, and learn about her life and what it would have been like to be a Jewish person during the Holocaust. Herman, do you have a question?
I feel like Anne Frank wouldn't have wanted people reading her diary.
She's like, this is personal. Well, I actually think there's a difference between a personal diary and a diary that is telling of events. Because a lot of times people will keep a diary because they want to share their feelings. Because she went through a horrific thing. She went through a really, really, really hard thing. So she wants to share with the world what happened. She doesn't want to keep that truth a secret because we all deserve to know what happened. So yeah, there is a difference between a personal diary where you're like, I think that Timmy is so cute, or oh, blah blah blah. Like that's a personal diary. Probably don't want anyone like reading it. I'm not gonna lie, I read my aunt's diary once, and she wrote her first line in her diary was that she was like she was like the boy I like, and then it was the boy's name. I forgot his name. It was like Sammy or something. She was like, yeah, I will spill it, this is the best gossip. She was like, my first crush is Sammy so and so from down the street, and I was like, oh goodness. We were getting into the good stuff. So that's a very personal diary. Um, there are also other journals and diaries where you talk about an event, you talk about feelings, things like that. When you're talking about Chase, I guarantee you're gonna feel different in a few years. So good. All right. Anyway, enough about diaries. This is another I know, don't tell me your secrets. I'm just kidding. I'm a good secret keeper. All right, so this is an example of another primary source, Anne Frank. Great, great, great source for historians. And here, remember yesterday we were talking about artifacts and how for your assignment you need to find an artifact from your life. Obviously, your artifacts are not going to look like this. I don't know who on earth would wear a stone necklace, but because I just think that would be so heavy. Can you imagine wearing a necklace made out of rocks? You'd be like weighed down all day. These artifacts are from the Stone Age, okay? They are thousands of years old. Thousands of years old. You can see it's kind of hard to tell what they are, but down in the corner, these are arrowheads. They are used to, Native Americans also used arrowheads where they would sharpen a rock really, really, really sharp, and they would fasten it to a pole, and they'd use it as a spear, and they could go hunting. They could also fasten it later on when humans got more advanced. They created bows and arrows where they could fasten it to the end of a stick, create an arrow, and that way they could shoot game. There's also other like these huge rocks were most likely used as like hammers, as a very primitive form of a hammer. You could take a really large stone, smooth it all the way out, and then fasten it to a larger piece of wood. Obviously, the wood is not with us still, but the beautiful thing about rocks is they last forever. So we found all of these artifacts, super cool. Again, not sure why. I guess the height of fashion in the Stone Age was like a stone necklace. That was like super fashionable. Not sure. So yeah, super great. Yes, I do, Emma. Yeah, the pain, it would be really painful. Anyway, these are all great examples of primary sources. Now I'm going to show you one more example of a primary source. This is a speech. So we kind of talked about how speeches, maybe we didn't talk about it, but I'm going to tell you now. Speeches and videos are great examples of primary sources if they are from the event. So what I'm going to show you is footage from Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Had a Dream speech. So this is real footage of him giving it. So you're going to see all the people that are in the video were actually there. They're real people. It is in black and white, which makes it look so cool. I love black and white. I think everybody looks good in black and white footage for some reason. Just makes you look so classic. Amaya.
I was about to say something about the rocks.
Okay, yeah.
You know how you were talking about the rocks? I remember I saw like a video about these rocks that had like water in it because they were like 1,000,000 or 1,000 years old.
Oh, that's cool. Wait, they had water in them?
Yeah, and if you like held it up to the light and shook it, you could see the water moving around inside of it.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Water, wow, that's really cool. I don't think I've ever seen that. I'm gonna have to look at that. That's super cool. Herman, did you have a comment or question, concern?
I was gonna say, didn't they? Why is it in black and white? Because didn't they have color? Like, couldn't they have stuff in color?
That is a great question. So, when color TV came out, the very first, okay, this is kind of a side note. Okay, the first color movie was The Wizard of Oz. Okay, The Wizard of Oz was the very first color movie. Now, what they would do is they would film a movie and then they would go back into the footage and they would paint the colors into it. They would paint the colors onto it. So, a lot of news teams, when they were filming footage, they were filming on black and white reel because color, really, it was just by the 60s, it was just becoming a more common thing. But before that, it was really only used in movies. But TV shows and the news, they pretty much used black and white reel. But the movies would take long footage, like in The Wizard of Oz, and they would go back and paint. So if you ever go and see that, like any movie prior to the 60s, and you look back, you'll notice that their colors, they're very vibrant because they literally painted it on the reel. So pretty cool. All right, I'm going to ask that the chat go quiet for a second so that we can watch this. We're only going to watch a minute of this speech, but I just want to give you an example of another primary source. So I'm going to try and do this. Here we go. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. 1 second. Okay. Can you all see this? I need a thumbs up or a thumbs down. No? Okay, I didn't think so. I hope. I have a lot of hope. It doesn't always happen, though. Okay, here we go. Shazam. Can you see that? I need a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Wonderful. Okay. So I don't know why my thumb is down. I just got lazy and I was like, "Grr." Okay. So
because we didn't listen.
oh, yeah. Okay, hold on, let me let Amonti in. Okay, we're only going to listen to a minute of it, so pay close attention. Take a look at what the people are wearing. Take a look at some of the things you notice about the 60s. And just make some observations about this time period because it's different than ours.
The island of poverty.
Let's
Live out the true meaning of its creed.
Oh, I went too far back.
We
Excuse me. Okay.
This nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream. My poor little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
So, great example of a primary source. Notice that when we were watching, you could see what their clothing looked like from the 60s. You could see how many people were there. It gave us a look to see what Martin Luther King Jr. looked like as a person instead of just looking at like a picture. So great example of a primary source. So, yeah, just so good. And so you can watch footage from lots of different things. We have footage that's even, yeah, Zora, tons of people were there. Tons of people. It was a huge event. And he says a lot of great things in there. The whole speech is longer than I just showed you a minute. But we have footage from lots of different events in history. We have footage even back into World War I. Okay, you can watch a whole documentary about World War I. So cool, so good. It gives us a lot of information about what it was like back then. So those are just examples of primary sources. Now, I'm going to go back and we're going to talk about another type of source, which is secondary sources. 1 second. There we go. Ding, ding, ding. Okay, can you see this? Thumbs up, thumbs down? Okay, good. Okay, watch. It's gonna make me start it from the beginning because you can't. You're right, I didn't say it, so it didn't work. Hold on. Okay. I saw someone. Let's try it one more time. Also, make sure when you are on your computers that you're not on airplane mode or anything like that. I had one student last class who's on airplane mode and they couldn't see it, and then she figured it out. So just make sure that all your internet and everything is working properly. Okay, so we have primary sources. Now we have secondary sources. Okay, so secondary sources are sources that are written by someone who was not at the event, i.e., historians, okay? Historians write textbooks. They write encyclopedias. Okay, they write these things about the past. Okay, so they are writing it, but they were not there. So it is a secondary source. A biography is an account written by somebody else about someone else. For example, if I were to do a biography on Abraham Lincoln, I'm not Abraham Lincoln. I am talking about his life, so it's a biography. Now, for your assignment, you are writing autobiographies, which means you're writing about yourself. So if Abraham Lincoln wrote about his own life, that would be an autobiography. But a biography is someone who's writing about someone else's life. Newspaper articles, this one is kind of disputed. Newspaper articles can be both primary sources and secondary sources. Why? Because newspapers are can be written about the past. So if I'm a news reporter and I'm writing about an event that already happened, then it's a secondary source. But if I'm a news reporter and I wrote about an event that is happening right now that I was an eyewitness, or I'm getting eyewitness accounts, then it's a primary source. So newspapers can be both, depending on what they're writing about and who wrote them. Journal articles, yep, if you're writing about a past event that's already happened that you weren't at. magazine articles, the work. So here's some examples. Ta-da! Britannica! Britannica is an encyclopedia. They have tons and tons of volumes about lots of different knowledge content. And this is an example of a secondary source. Over here on the right side, these are just a stack of textbooks. So anytime we use textbooks in class, we're using a secondary source. Now, why am I showing you primary and secondary sources? Because I want you to know that as a historian, you must use lots of sources. It's important that you use both secondary and primary sources. So historians take primary sources, they take lots of different things, they compile the evidence, and then they write about it. And what they write about is a secondary source. So for the purpose of this class, you're going to be using primary sources and secondary sources, which is why it is important to learn about them. So now, to make sure that you have the difference down, I am going to show you a short video. Hold on, not this one, but this one. All right, I need a thumbs up or a thumbs down if you, man, I had a feeling, you know, I had a feeling, and that was what it is. Here we go. Okay, make sure we're paying attention and we're not talking with our neighbors. Can you see that? Thumbs up, thumbs down. Beautiful. All right, here we go.
Primary means first, or first-hand. So think of primary sources as materials that are first-hand. They're connected to an historical event because they were created during the time of the event or because they involve someone who participated firsthand. For example, if you're researching the civil rights movement in Minnesota, you might find primary sources related to Matthew Little, a Minneapolis civil rights activist who went to the March on Washington in 1963. Little listened to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. deliver his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Little wrote notes and letters about that day, and someone took photos of Little at the march. Notes, letters, photos, these are all primary sources because they document Little's first-hand experiences with the civil rights movement. In your research, you might also find this oral history interview with civil rights activist Nellie Stone Johnson, which is also a primary source.
And these organizations all got together and formed a coalition.
Even though the interview was recorded after the civil rights movement, it's still a primary source because Johnson was involved firsthand in the movement. Other examples of primary sources include newspaper articles, autobiographies, maps, government records, art, and films. As long as the item is from the time you're researching or documents someone's first-hand experience, it's a primary source. Something else to remember, it doesn't matter if you're looking at the original primary source or a copy of the primary source. They are both primary sources. Secondary, of course, means after first. So secondary sources are materials created after a historical event. Let's say you're still researching the civil rights movement, and you're looking for information about Lena Olive Smith, Minnesota's first female African-American lawyer. This article about Smith was written by a law professor in 2001, well after the civil rights movement, so it's a secondary source. Here's a web page about Smith. It was created in 2014, so it's also a secondary source. Secondary sources include books, biographies, articles, dissertations, websites, and documentary films, as long as they were written about a person or historical event at a later time. Many secondary sources get their information from primary sources. Just look at the footnotes or bibliography at the end of the secondary source to see what primary sources were used. Let's test your knowledge. Here's a photocopy of the Minneapolis Spokesman newspaper from April 1968, soon after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Is this a primary or secondary source? It's a primary source because the newspaper is from the time of the assassination. Even though it's a photocopy and not the original paper itself, it's still a primary source. Here's a book about the Civil Rights Movement, written by a history professor and published in 1990. Is it a primary or secondary source? It's a secondary source because it was written after the Civil Rights Movement by someone who was not a first-hand participant. This is a book of letters written by Jackie Robinson, who broke the color barrier in Major League Baseball. It was published in 2007. Is it a primary or secondary source? It's a primary source. Even though it was published in 2007, it contains copies of letters written by Robinson, a first-hand participant in the Civil Rights Movement. Now that you know what primary and secondary sources are, have fun researching. And remember, if you need help, ask a librarian. You can call, email, or ask questions in person. Visit www.mna.
Okay, then she gives you like a website. Okay, so she went over some great similarity, or she went over the differences between primary and secondary sources. So now we are going to, as a class, okay, here we go. So here we go. So let's go back to our PowerPoint. Can you all see that? Yeah. Okay. I wonder if there's a way to start it from like not the beginning. You know? I bet there is. I'll have to figure that out. Okay. One of you probably knows, and I just need to learn. You know, we're all students and we're all teachers. Okay. You still see the video. That's not going to work. Okay, let me stop sharing. And then here we go. Shazam. There it is. Okay. Can you see that? Okay, beautiful. All right, so there's examples. Now let's practice. In the chat, is this a primary or a secondary source? This is a photograph of Queen Victoria of England. Primary or secondary? Photograph of Queen Victoria. This is primary. Remember, photographs from the time period. This is a photograph of her, so it is a primary source. Good, because it is from the time period. Look at her crown. It's so cute. Okay, let's keep going.
Miss Tracy,
Yes.
can we just write P or like that for
Yes.
primary?
That sounds like a good idea, because that would be a fast way to respond. Yep, you can write P or S, because I'll know what you're saying. Yes, some of you already started. This is the Constitution of the United States, and it is primary. Good, because it is a document, and it is a, and even if it was, so this is just a photo of the original. Even though it's not the original document and it's just a photo, or if it's a photocopy, it's still a primary source. So next, primary or secondary? Good. Good, secondary. Yep, textbooks, they were written by somebody else, so they are secondary. This one, remember, newspapers are... I should see a mixed bag because they're both. They're both. This is a newspaper from the time when President Kennedy was assassinated. But because somebody was writing about the time, it's also a secondary source, so it can be both. Very good. All right. So, chat. I'm like a conductor. I'm like, you know, like, and release. Okay, so now after we've gone through our primary and secondary sources, hopefully you all have a pretty good grasp of that. Hold on, I don't know why I did that. I should just stop sharing. Okay, there we go. So now we have about 25 minutes that I'm going to give you to work on your autobiographies. Just as a reminder about what you're supposed to be doing, you are writing an autobiography about an important event that happened in your life. This could be any of your favorite memories. It could be a significant time for you. But the biggest problem I'm seeing with students who've already turned it in is they're not long enough. I'm asking you for 300 words, okay? If you don't know how to see that, Rafe, that is a lot. We're done with the chat. So if you're not sure how many words you have, you can see that at the when you're on Google Docs or Word, you can see it usually at the bottom left-hand corner. You can see your word count. Okay, so it's approximately 3 paragraphs long. You do need to indent. So I'm going to actually show you all an example of what I'm looking for. 1 second. Okay, here we go. Let's see, not my mail. Let's just do screen 1. Okay. I'm gonna go over here. Let's see. Da, 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 da. Okay, hold on. Oh, it's so weird. I have like so many things. Okay, I'm gonna open up a Word document. One that I wrote a while back. 1 second. Documents. Okay. Okay, this was a journal that I did a while back. This is not your assignment, but this is the format that I want, okay? So you can see, can you all see that? Thumbs up, thumbs down. You can see that it's a Word document. Okay, notice that with my paragraphs, they are indented. Do you see this? They're indented. To indent your paragraph, you just press the Tab key on your keyboard. That will push over the first sentence. So you must indent every paragraph. Notice this is, I made up a name, Jane Smith. So your name needs to be in the top left-hand corner with the date, the period that you're in. So this was a first period. You guys are in second period. And then you can put your homeroom teacher, which is Miss Blickfeld. Okay? Yes. Okay, so then you need to come up with a title, and you can put it in the middle. And then you can write your autobiography. This paper is 613 words. I'm only requiring you to do half of that. My gift to you, okay? So this is kind of what I'm looking for in terms of, not all of you can see it. Okay, 1 second. I'll show you one more time. This is what I'm looking for in terms of how I want it to look. Your formatting, okay? This is proper formatting, and you're going to be using this type of formatting throughout your middle school and high school and college if you choose to go to college, all of those years, okay? You're going to be using this format. So remember, indent in every paragraph, looking for 3 paragraphs about an important event in your life. I'm looking for your name, your date, your class period, and your homeroom teacher in the corner, and it needs to be 300 words. Now, to double space, both in Google Docs and Microsoft Word, you see this little up, down, and these lines? It's like above paragraph. It has a drop down, and you can click that, and it says 2.0. That will make all of your lines double spaced. In Google Docs, it's the same symbol, but you click the down button and it says double, and you literally click that, and it'll make it easier to read. You may submit it one of 2 ways. Your Word document can upload to Canvas, or if you are doing it on Google Docs, you can just share it with my email. Either one is acceptable. If you forget any of these instructions, all of these instructions are on the when you click Travel Journal 1, it'll have all these instructions. You can find your word count in the bottom left-hand corner. It says, 600 words, 500 words, 400 words. I'm looking for a lot of detail. Another problem I have seen with the ones that I've received so far is that they tell me a story, but you don't give me an ending. How terrible is it to read a story and you don't even know the ending? You guys. So make sure you're giving me an ending to your story. Otherwise, I'm like, what happened? What happened? So make sure that you're giving me lots of detail and an ending to your story. Don't just be like, this one time my family and we took a trip to Costa Rica, and then I saw this really big sea turtle. and then that's it. I'm like, well, what happened? I mean, like, what happened to the sea turtle? So I need detail and I need an ending. I'm looking for an intro, a body, and a conclusion. Okay, intro paragraph, body, what happened, and a conclusion. I'm going to give you the rest of class to work on this. If you are finished, then you are going to do this. It's just a review reading. It's not even painful at all, so you'll be okay. You can go to Canvas. Let me get rid of that. And I know you probably won't be able to see this. Hold on, because for some reason when I switch tabs, it's like you guys can't see it, and I don't know why, but that's just how it is. Some of you can and some of you can't. Okay, I'm going to share again. So if you are done, you're going to go to your Canvas and you're going to go to Module 1, and the very, very last thing on the modules, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to press that. No, it denied me access. How rude. Okay, let's see. So you'll go to Social Studies, you'll click the very last thing that's under Module 1, and you'll find your 1.02 Discovering History reading. Wow, this is being slow. Here we go. So you click on 1.02 Discovering History, and it'll have your review from what we've been talking about, and it'll have activities at the bottom where you can practice your knowledge on what you've learned. Okay. The rest of the time is yours till 10:30. Yes, you do need to stay on WebEx. You can just minimize and work on it. We are second period, so stay on till 10:30, and then you get an hour and a half break. So work hard so you don't have to do this weekend. It is due Monday, and remember, on Monday we are sharing our artifacts. So after you finish your autobiography, you need to find an artifact from the event. It can be a photo, it can be an object, it can be a video, anything that's from the event. We're looking for primary resources. So be prepared to share on Monday. Yes, it can be, the event can go over multiple days.
Miss Tracy,
Yes.
what if we don't have like an artifact from that time? Can we just like draw a picture?
Do you have a photo from that event? Do you have anything that symbolizes the event? An object? What is your event?
I went to Idaho and I went to my grandma's sister cabin.
Ooh, that's fun.
Mhm.
Do you have any pictures from your trip? You
No.
didn't take any pictures from your trip? Oh my goodness. You could just find an object.
Well, my mom probably does, but
Why don't you ask your mom, and if she doesn't have any photos, then find an object that represents your trip from Idaho.
okay.
I can see 3 of Kaylee on my screen.
Yes, we have many Kylies here with us today.
Yeah,
Hello,
Kylie.
Kylie 1, Kylie 2, and
Yeah, there's 3 of them. I was like, wait, there's 2 of them, and now there's 3.
yeah, I don't.
Soon my whole entire screen is going to be full of
Kylie's. Yeah, sometimes with WebEx, when it kicks you out, it like creates another person. Eventually, it does go away. So Kylie, just hang in there. It'll go away when I end the meeting, so you won't have to deal with it.